Most people see lonely or otherwise unhappy people and want to find ways to make their lives better. At the very least, we hope that their situation doesn't get any worse. That's part of the reason why those who take advantage of vulnerable people are so despicable. How could anyone in their right mind take advantage of innocent and susceptible people for their own financial gain? Unfortunately, Ralph Raines Jr., a simple yet wealthy man, recently learned that not everyone has such strong moral compass. He visited a local psychic, and what she did to him over the course of the next several years was almost too shocking for words. Ralph Raines Jr. of Gaston, Oregon, was his parents' only child and thus the heir to his father's company, R.W. Raines Tree Farm. The Douglas Fir Tree Farm had made his family millionaires by the time that he became an adult. Unfortunately, Ralph's father commonly abused him, even as an adult living at home. Ralph became lonely without any close friends or a partner. Likewise, he soon became deeply interested in the occult. Just a year earlier, a professional psychic from California named Rachel Lee had relocated to Oregon to open her business. She wanted to start a new life after losing her first husband and parents. She and Ralph clandestinely met in 2004 when Ralph first walked into her store. It immediately became clear that Ralph was lonely, and he quickly opened up to Rachel and revealed many of his secrets, including the fact that he was a millionaire. It wasn't long until Rachel sensed that she might have an opportunity at hand. The two strangers quickly became friends, and all the while, Ralph didn't realize what Rachel had planned for him. She knew that he was lonely and that he desperately sought companionship, so she spent the next 2 years exploiting that. Soon enough, Ralph saw Rachel as both a confidant and his closest friend. In return, she began brainwashing him to influence his decisions, all while he was returning her favor with gifts. For example, she convinced him to hire Blancy Lee, her on-again, off-again boyfriend, to perform various odd jobs around his home. In 2006, 2 years after they met, it was clear that Rachel was a regular part of Ralph's life, and she was involved in everything from his finances to his love life. She talked him into buying a $915,000 Portland home for her family by convincing him that it was an investment. Not long after, Blancy and Rachel were living in the home with 4 of their 5 children. Ralph, meanwhile, still lived on the tree farm with his father. Rachel had definitely taken charge, but she was only getting started. Things started to change in October of that year when Ralph's father had a stroke and began requiring around-the-clock care. Rachel decided to become his caretaker, and they even went so far as to move him into the house in Portland. He slept in a hallway, while the rest of the family slept in comfortable bedrooms. Most people would have started to realize that something was seriously wrong far sooner, but Ralph didn't see it that way. From his perspective, Rachel and her family were giving him everything that he needed, since they looked after his father and his house. The next year, something even stranger occurred. On his way back from a timber convention, Ralph was waiting for Rachel to pick him up at the Portland International Airport when a woman with a British accent and blonde hair struck up a conversation with him. Little did Ralph know that she was actually Portia Lee, Rachel's 17-year-old daughter. It was all part of Rachel's plan. Portia claimed to be a woman named Mary Marks, and she convinced Ralph that she had psychic powers, offering to do a reading for him. She had been trained to con people by her mother, after all, and once again, poor Ralph was fooled. Barely 6 months had passed before Portia told Ralph that she'd be deported if she didn't get a green card soon. Soon enough, the unlikely couple was married, though Mary claimed to have a job in California which prevented her from living with Ralph. Weirder still, she eventually talked Ralph into impregnating her via artificial insemination. After Portia told Ralph that she was pregnant with his child, she and her mother conspired to have one of Rachel's grandsons, from one of her other daughters of course, pretend to be Ralph's son. They'd even already picked out a name, Giorgio Armani. In March of 2008, Ralph gave Rachel complete control of his finances. Almost immediately, his stocks were all sold and deposited into her corporate account. She even went so far as to pay herself for taking care of Ralph's father. The grift started to unravel once a Portland detective became suspicious of the Ferrari parked outside Rachel's psychic business. How could someone at her income level afford that? This prompted an IRS investigation of Ralph's finances. Immediately, investigators realized that something was very wrong, and they visited Ralph's tree farm for further investigation. Shockingly, when they arrived, all the trees were missing. Rachel had sold almost the entire thing to amass a multi-million-dollar fortune. She simply told Ralph that he had become broke, and he believed her. The officials requested and received a search warrant to search Rachel's Portland mansion right away. There they found all the evidence that they needed, including expensive jewelry and even the disguise Portia used to act as Mary Marks. On May 8, 2014, Rachel and Portia were in the psychic shop, packed and ready to leave, when the authorities arrived. Rachel had thousands of dollars stuffed into her underwear, and both women were carrying disposable phones. Meanwhile, Ralph's fortune was reduced to just $200,000. Oddly enough, Ralph held no ill will towards the women, even though they were both sent to jail. He even hand-wrote a letter to prosecutors claiming that he was not a victim, and he spoke favorably about Rachel in court. Additionally, he still wanted to have a relationship with Giorgio, even though he knew he wasn't really the boy's father. Hopefully, Ralph will come to terms with what happened to him soon,